Hey everyone, in this video I'll be talking about the 5 biggest beginner mistakes that fixing helped me get to a peak rating of 2258 on chess.com. Literally just fixing these 5 simple mistakes, and you can do it too if you just follow along. So let's get right into it, but make sure to like and subscribe. So, this first mistake actually occurs off the chessboard, and it's one that I think affects people all the way up to even the 2000s, maybe mid 2000s, because the thing is that if you want to actually get above that, you can't be making this mistake. And now, what is that? Well, it is improperly analyzing your games. So, when you're playing chess, every game, think of it like a lesson. Every mistake you make is a way that you can learn. Every good thing you do is a thing that you can repeat. There's so much wealth from every single game you play, unless it's like a mindless bullet game. But even then, you can still learn about how to use or how to play the opening based off of what you did. So, how to properly analyze them? Well, one of the biggest things I suggest is that whether you're a premium member or a regular member and you have one free game review or unlimited, don't use game review until you are done with the game. So what I mean by that is, let's take an example from my own game and I'll show you how I would properly analyze it. So I just pulled up one of my own games, and now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to click on this review tab, but I'm going to turn on only the evaluation bar. So now what you should do in your games is you should go by move, and watch that eval bar, and you got to think, okay, well, why did I play everything, and so on and so forth. And the moment that you get to a mistake, like here, I made a mistake. Notice how the eval bar dropped. The moment that you find a point where the eval bar drops, this is where you need to just sit there and think through it, because you're not going to learn anything if you just go, ooh, I wonder what the best move can be, and they turn the engine lines and it's right there. You need to actually put yourself into the position, because how your brain remembers these patterns in chess is through repetition. And so the more time you spend looking at your mistakes and learning and figuring out how to not make them, the more that is ingrained in your brain. I promise you, you will not make those same mistakes again. And in multiple games, there's so many different things you can learn from your mistakes, from good things you did, from the openings. The most amazing resource for you is your own games, especially longer games where you have time to think and you actually have thought processes, because usually those can be improved on at any stage of the game. And then another big thing is going over master games. So if you're anything like me, you watch Gotham Chess on YouTube or any other, or Godmother or Eric Rosen, whatever, you watch a chess YouTuber, and that is a perfect way to absorb master content when it is a strong player explaining the moves, the thought processes. But you're not going to learn anything unless you're pretty strong by going over master games, going, yeah, I see why they played all that. To learn something from the game, you need to have someone strong enough to be able to understand their ideas and explain, whether that's yourself or a friend or a coach, to be able to look and explain why something happened, why it happened, and how you can learn from that. So a big mistake I see is people going over master games, stuff like this, and without someone helping them, because the truth of the matter is, unless you're like 22, 2300, I completely struggle with it. I'm not guilty from this. This applies to everything. It's really good to have someone. So if you're going to go over master games, have it be on like a YouTube video. And yeah, let's get to mistake number 2.
Bruh.
Now, the next most common mistake may seem like a really obvious one, which is putting your pieces on good squares or lack thereof. Now, why this is so important is because you need to have a new style of thinking in order to get to the higher rating ladders. And that style of thinking is that your pieces are no longer just little pixels, little pieces of wood. They're your soldiers. Okay? And if you give them what they want, they will give you what you want, the win. And so what do each piece want? Well, for instance, the bishop, so especially like being on or having your pawns on the opposite color of it. This dark squared bishop is not very happy in this example situation because it does not have much mobility. So that is why you put pawns on the opposite color square so the bishops can move. Knights really like outposts. So let's get into the first game as an example of one of my games. A good example of how I managed to demonstrate this pretty well is in this random blitz game where we were playing a Tarrasch defense. And now, the move here, the theoretical move, which I played, is knight e5. This is a very good example of giving a knight what it wants. So let's take a look at my pieces. This knight has very good pressure against his weakness, this backwards pawn. My bishop, many of my pawns are on the opposite color square, and it is exerting pressure on this backwards pawn. This knights love outposts. It loves being supported and held together. So again, you have to give your pieces what they want. So as the game goes on, I trade off my dark squared bishop. Why do I trade off the bishop? You hear so much about how, oh, bishops are better than knights. Well, because look, I purposefully put on the last move pawn to e3, which was theory. I purposely put my pawns on dark squares so I could trade off my bad dark squared bishop because my pawns are in dark squares and it can't go anywhere for his dark squared bishop, which now it can't do anything. Now my light squared bishop rules. So then obviously we back up the knight, and I went on to win a very quick, easy game where all I did this whole game was create a weakness here, and I built up all my pieces until I won it. So let's see how a student of mine, or rather one of my really good friends, he'll be bullied a lot in this video, don't worry, Paul, manages to put his pieces. He's about a 1400, which is better than I'd say about 80% of the people watching this video. So Paul here is in a regular blitz match. He's a bit under 1400, which is where he's usually at, versus a pretty solid player. And now Paul here has played this sort of Queen's Indian structure. So let's see how he manages to put his pieces on squares. To start with, I would say the first bad move of the game, knight to d5. Well, let's discuss why. So obviously the intent is to trade off these bishops. However, you have to compare the quality, the good squares of the bishops. This bishop, its only purpose of going here and here was to pin your knight to the queen. Now that the pin is no longer there, this bishop is no longer on a good square. It has served its purpose of pinning. Now it is doing nothing. And its best hope is to go here where it gets what it wants. More squares. Again, you're noticing the theme of properly placing squares. And so by trading off these bishops, that is exactly what your opponent doesn't want. Besides, that just helps your opponent go to where they're going to go. And now look what you've achieved. Is this knight, you may be thinking, okay, this knight looks like it's on an outpost. It's guarded, it's backed up. However, this knight physically can't move anywhere. So at this point, after moving a knight once just to trade pieces, you have put a knight on a terrible square where it can physically do nothing. And honestly, your best bet is moving back and wasting 2 moves. So you see the process of, especially after a sequence, of not just doing things because you can. You need to do things that make sense, and you give your pieces what they want. And again, Paul does this. It seems very logical to develop. However, look at where the knight is developing. It physically cannot go anywhere. This is a bad knight. Paul went on to get crushed as you start to notice the themes. Developing is good. However, you want to develop in the best way. Let's get to the next mistake. So upon hearing this, such a tendency to just forget there's another person, or like forget that they have their own threats and their own plans and their own ideas. And it's one of just the biggest mistakes in chess, which is why it's here, at least personally, because you just simply go ahead with your own plans and then you get checkmated because I don't know, you just space out and ignore the other opponent. So again, as we did last time, let's look at a game of mine that's slightly more subtle, and then absolutely another beautiful, terrific game from Paul. So yeah, let's get into it. This one was definitely pretty dumb of me, I would say, that I let this happen, but against a national master, playing English, everything is going great, it's all going normal, but you see, the thing is that my opponent, he is making a clear threat. He wants to open up my king, and for some inexplicable reason, I say, yeah, I'm going to castle, and it seems fine. Which the engine agrees, but this is one of the dumbest things in hindsight I could have done, because I completely, instead of maybe doing something like h3 to go g4 or doing something to deal with the threat, I just castle. And then I completely let him blow up my king for no reason. And the moment that his queenside arrives, I proceeded to just pretty much get my cheeks clapped for quite a bit. I did win the game, but this is just again an example of instead of me properly responding, where after he goes here, I can do something like I probably like put my knight here, or like go here, develop a bishop, or do something really calm. But by me going with my own plan to push here, I simply forget that there's another person, that his attack is way faster. And I definitely should have lost because it went to a really big attack and I barely made it out. So that's it happens on my level where I just like don't pay as much attention. However, I rarely make this mistake, and usually, as you can tell, is because it's the blitz opening and I'm spending like 2 seconds per move. So this applies more as like a cognitive thinking thing. This is just me being a dumbass. So, but hey, it happens. I'm guilty, man. I'm guilty of making these mistakes still. Probably not. Probably why I'm not 2300 yet. We're close. Alright, so now let's look at a beautiful example of Paul's games. Paul always finds a way to brighten up my day when I watch his games. Like, it's just incredible sometimes. So yeah, we have a 1390 rated Paul versus a 1445 rated random opponent. So let's see if Paul, a pretty good player I'd say, manages to assess his opponent's threats. Okay. So this is one of the most common things in all of chess. The Greek gift. It is a bishop sacrifice for checkmate. And you see why the Greek gift doesn't work here is because after all this, the knight can't go here because of this. And so the only reason your opponent is playing h4 is to hope that you miss this. And so logically, the best thing to do is to ignore it completely. Paul is honestly, he's on that gangster mindset. He's on that Rocky Balboa mindset, just taking punch after punch after punch. Is like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I don't need to worry about this. So his opponent missed it as well. Yeah, makes sense. It's a sacrifice. It's difficult to see, and you should never take this because you see when Paul in 2 seconds chooses to take this, he also just loses because of this. He completely opens up and that's a big threat because you have a ton of pressure. But again, Paul full gangster mode does not care about the opponent. We're just gonna play our own moves. So knight goes here, and again this is threatened. Okay, me attack knight. The queen comes in. This looks very scary. Now remember, you can't take here because that's mate. So how does Paul deal with it? Okay. So, again, forgetting that his opponent can respond to his moves. And in fact, can respond simply by forking his queen and rook. So, remember, every time that you make a move, you have to consider, okay, well then what does my opponent play? And here, I'm sure Paul thought something reasonable like this. And then now he's just a super genius. So, opponent castles. Yeah, makes sense. Again, just a blundering main one. Who knows why? He forgore. He forgore that his opponent also wants to win. And his opponent forgot too. So Paul checks him, very sensible. The king moves, and now it's just GG's and Paul resigns. So you see how quickly a game can go downhill when you simply tunnel on what you're doing and you completely ignore that your opponent has a plan they're thinking through. So a good solution to this, if you wish to know, is every time that your opponent makes a move, ask yourself, why did they make that move? Are they developing? Are they attacking me? Are they defending something? Are they responding? Or do they have a plan? Do they have a threat? And I promise you'll win, or at least not lose, way more games if you just start paying attention to what your opponent is actually doing. So, let's take a beautiful 10-minute rapid game from our boy Paul. And now, when our opponent goes here, you have 3 options here, okay? Number 1, make an instant move and blunder the game. Number 2, think for a little bit and notice that if you take the queen, you win a rook. Or option 3, take a lot of time and notice that, but a bit slower. Now, obviously, the most logical option, 10-minute game, is to spend 9 seconds and then lose the whole game. So, why do you guys do this, okay? I think Paul's a perfect example of like a medium chess player, but why do you boot up 10-minute games or 15, 10 games and you spend 4 seconds? Like if you look at the time usage, it why bother booting up a 10-minute game, especially when you're going to do stuff like this? Why? Time management, this is going to be the shortest segment because honestly, I can't tell you how to do it better, but we all know we do it. You think too little, and it's too late a lot of the time. So, what's a good thing to practice is that in positions when you aren't sure what to do, or where there's multiple options, or where your opponent just made a threat or a sacrifice, just, calm down and do what's intended of the game. Think through it, and I promise, especially when you're on tilt, which is something that I'll talk about in a whole separate video because we all get those, and that I can't summarize that in a few minutes. But just sit there, think, find a good move, and be happy. Okay? Short segment, but you get the point. We all get the point. We all innately know that we do it. So this final one is going to be the only one that I do not have any examples for because it is applicable to every move of every game that you will ever play in your life. And sure, any example is to pick from, so I'd rather just have a chat. So one of the biggest mistakes I see for almost any player is simply making sense. So when you make a move, you have to ask, what does this do? Does this make sense? Like, let's take an example. First move, knight f3. I am developing a piece. They are claiming space in the center, etc., etc., etc. As the game goes on, you always need to think to yourself beforehand, do my moves make sense? And then, as I've talked about before, it's all building on an actual thought process. You wonder why the better you are, the more you think. It's because you calculate more, and there's a lot more thinking that needs to be done. You're thinking, what am I doing? How are they responding? It is a mental battle, not just a battle of who knows how to move the pieces better. So, after every move, ask yourself, well, what does this do? Am I developing? Am I attacking? Like, is there a check, a capture, a threat? Like, sometimes they have to make sense beyond just one move. So when we talk about one move attacks in chess, Gotham Chess talks about these a lot, but let's just give a really dumb example. Here, where this move makes sense as it is attacking a queen, but it doesn't make sense because obviously it blunders the bishop, but for one move it does. And this is a terrible example, don't get me wrong, but you always have to think about the moves after. So this makes sense now, and depending on how they respond, does it still make sense in the long term? Are we putting a piece because it's the best square, or just because it attacks something? It makes the most sense of how it is going to affect you throughout the entire game. And it seems really simple. Like, I'm sorry if these mistakes seem simple, repetitive, redundant, whatever word you want to use, but the honest truth is everyone's individual journey is completely different, and fixing these mistakes were what helped me be able to get to a 2200 level. This does not mean it will help you, and obviously there were countless hours of other things in chess that helped me, but fixing these, in my opinion, quite simple mistakes was what did it for me. And I hope it can do the same for you. So if you like this video, if you liked more educational, more calm videos where I'm not like throwing chairs because I lost in bullet, subscribe.